I did actually write out notes for this review that I wanted to do because it's kind of a big film and we're getting to see it a week before it comes out in cinemas, and so I thought try and do like a nice structured thing following a script. And you know, I still might include this with the article when it goes up on the website, but as I was kind of driving on the way back, I kind of just thought I'd rather just go off the cuff and just talk about it, because I found myself getting a lot more into talking about certain aspects of the film than I had been when I was trying to write it into a thoughtful way. And I'll start by basically saying that it's not a bad film by any means. I have a feeling that from the way that I tend to review things is that I'm going to spiral more into the negative things, and as I think of stuff, I'll just bring it up. And so I want to always start with, you know, the positives is that I do think that this is an okay film. I think there are moments where it shines. I think there are moments where it definitely improves on the original source material, and that is primarily in the story structure, I would say. But at the same time, it felt like a simulator ride, but the ride itself had stopped working, so you were just watching the film. Really, it just didn't feel real, and I know that that's going to make some people roll their eyes, because obviously over half the film is just completely CGI. But what I mean is that it never even felt real, even in the bits that were shot. It just always felt like it was trying to race towards the next reference, race towards the next thing. And because of it, I think we were just left with a film that didn't really capture the technology, didn't really capture the spirit that it wants to go for, and I don't think it got that magical atmosphere that they really were hoping for with pushing for Spielberg and the way that the marketing seems to be headed. Because it feels like the film is always trying to distract you with something. It's always got, there's so much stuff in this film. I mean, you can see it just in the trailers, like there's multiple winding long takes as we go through action after action, and it's all perfectly choreographed CGI action, and there's stuff and references, explosions, and it's constantly trying to keep your attention, but there's nothing really tying you to the film itself. Like Wade Watts is a very paper-thin character. He does not really have much to him besides the fact that he likes video games. Granted, I think it's an improvement on the character, because in the book he was a teenager, and not in the way that it felt like the writer knew he was an annoying teenager. It felt like the annoying teenager was the hero and he was presented the way he was as a hero. So in a way, by stripping back his character, they've somewhat improved him and they've made him more likeable. So it's not really saying anything about the main character. It's not really saying anything about the world itself and how people are treating VR, this new Oasis experience. Like, there are brief glimpses of it where people are running through the streets somehow while playing the game and not running into lampposts and things like that. I'm not going to get nitpicky, it's just that that's never at any point is the ideal of dual personalities. Like, it's even less of a concept in the film than it is in the book, where it's a very minor thing. And I say that the most present theme is definitely the past of Halliday and how the main character and Halliday are linked. However, that, again, because Wade Watts is a very paper-thin character, it doesn't really fully connect at any point. And even still, there are so many distractions and there's not enough time just to sink into any moment that you really feel this connection. There are two moments in the film in particular where it actually takes a moment to slow down. Just two, bear in mind. One of which just feels like you've slammed on the emergency brake, because it's suddenly like these two characters need to interact now because the script demands it, and so we're gonna just completely halt. The whole film I did want it to slow down, but that's what I mean by emergency brake. Like, it just suddenly went, nope, we're stopping for this scene. And the way that it went into the scene as well was so kind of awkward and forced. And that, again, that's how I feel with a lot of the film. It's awkward and forced because there's no heart to a lot of it. And the second slow scene is one with heart to it, and even then it feels like it's been skimmed down, and they also are cutting in between that scene with more stuff that really doesn't need to be there. I just want a full emotional scene at some point in this film, and it wasn't letting you have that because it knew that there wasn't really an emotional message to it. And that kind of leads me into the visuals, which is that it didn't really feel like a Spielberg film, except for certain moments. Like, for example, Spielberg is kind of considered like one of the great visual storytellers. Like, he will give you details just through images, and that's enough. And the first 10 or even 15 minutes of this film feels like it's completely consumed by this one voiceover. Like, it is just Wade telling you thing after thing after thing, to the point where, like, I feel bad for whoever has to do the audio description, because I don't know where they're going to have a break to put stuff in. It was all stuff that could have so been easily just shown way quicker, way simpler. And that's the thing as well, is that there's so much stuff to get through with this source material. And that's not necessarily a compliment to the book, but what I'm saying is that if they skimmed as much as they could and still kept the important emotional parts, then I could understand, and I could say, well, they did the best with the material, but it was just hard to adapt. However, there's so much padding as well, and even though I do think that they do some actually rather clever reconstructing of the central, like, plot structure, there are moments where you really could have trimmed it down and just gotten right to the heart of everything. And it would have given you more time with the characters, it would have given you more time to explore the world. It was very fast-paced, but it kept sticking on certain notes for longer than it should have. For instance, towards the very, very end of the film, not spoilers, you know they've got to find the Easter egg, that's the general plot of the film, but there is a reference towards an old video game that I think that even if you have like a rudimental knowledge of video game history, I think that you'd know it. I mean, I know it, and I don't remember if it's in the book or not, but I do think that I'd know it anyway. And it was a nice thing that they put in, and then I was expecting them to kind of let people get it for a bit, like people that knew it, and then have a moment where they explain it. And they did do that, and then they explained it again, and then they explained it again, and I think it was 4 times they actually brought it up, what the reference was. And at this point, I just was thinking, it's just flogging a dead horse. If you'd left it in the first place and not mentioned it, then that's great for people that actually know the history. Bringing it up because it actually relates to the plot of the film, this reference, that's good as well, because it was a speech. It was actually an emotional moment. Again, it was trying to build a heart to the film. But to repeat it so many times, it just makes it feel like the writer is saying, I'm smart, I'm clever, look at this thing that I did. It just tends to repeat itself a lot. Right, that was onward with the directing point that I was actually making, even though I dragged that out. Right, again, parts just didn't feel like Spielberg. Like, there are moments where it feels like a typical American, like, ad-libbed comedy involving T.J. Miller, like, and it feels like he's just walked in off a scene of Deadpool, and he's just throwing around lines. Like, they're not even that funny, and I don't think they landed in the cinema, which was full of fans and were laughing at most jokes. Again, forced. It felt like the studio had seen a first cut or something like that and said, it's not funny enough, like, we need more jokes to put in, shovel in more jokes. And as well is that Spielberg is known for directing child actors very well. And the child performance in this, it gets 3 lines as a child performance, and it's the worst performance in the entire film. Maybe T.J. Miller takes that, but it's the second worst performance in the entire film. And I just think, where's Spielberg? He knows how to direct kids. Why do you have this kid that's giving, again, 3 lines? Every time it just felt like it was the first take, like no one had taken him aside and given him pointers. It didn't feel as methodical or as smart as Spielberg. It may not be a surprise at this point, but I didn't really like the book, and I wasn't anticipating the film. But then there was one trailer that actually sold me on it, and it was the Imagination trailer. And I know that some people didn't like it, but part of it just worked for me, and I think it was a mix of the original Pure Imagination. Like, it was warm and it was homely, and it felt like it made me think back to watching Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and that's like the cinematic just joy of watching something from your childhood and something spectacular that you think could be real. So it was going for that aspect, as well as the way that they turned it up, and it was like the blaring sounds when the text came on screen, like dun, dun, dun. So it felt like the right balance of like the warmth and epicness that I think that this film could have had. Like, when I say I don't like the book, whereas some people, you know, feel like it comes from a place of pure hatred because of the full references, and I understand that. I don't think of it with anger, I just think of it with disappointment, because I think that there is truly a really good idea somewhere in Ready Player One. I really think that there is. I was really hoping that this film could find that and bring it to the surface, and the Imagination trailer actually got it for me. Like I said, it was uplifting. The shots that I'd seen in the other trailers, they felt different with this new score, because it had that epicness and that hopefulness and heart and warmth. It just feels like a film with something missing. And I've said that in many ways throughout this review. I've said that it doesn't have heart. I've said that it doesn't have pacing. There are brief glimpses in the real world moments where score will come in. And I was thankful for the score coming in, because it felt... There's a quote by Spielberg going around that they didn't want to make a film, they wanted to make a movie. And a lot of the times it doesn't feel like a movie, it feels like a cutscene. And the parts where they play score underneath it, and in the real world, like at the final slow scene that I mentioned of the 2 slow scenes, that felt like a movie. Like, that felt like the resolution to a film. But most of it just feels shallow, and like they could have done more to capture, I don't know, the essence of how massive this world could be. Or just how fun it could be. Like, as well, the other trailers have used, like, Jump and other songs that do feature in the film. But the big car chase scene that appears in those trailers that happens right at the very beginning of the film, no music through the... Like, it could have been so fun to have that 80s soundtrack. Like, I know other films recently have done it using a pop soundtrack. And in a way, I would have liked that as well, because it would have said, you know, we're not taking this seriously, we're going to have fun with the idea. But it doesn't do that. It just plays out the chase scene, and it's just... There's not enough personality, there's not enough heart, the jokes fall flat. But again, I think that it... Narratively, I think it had big improvements on the book, but in the end I'm still left feeling the same way that I felt when I read the book, which is that there's still like a nugget of an idea in there. There's still something that actually captivates me with the idea of the, like, people going into the virtual world and anything being possible, and the idea of the hunting for the Easter egg. That idea, I think, is I think it's a really good idea. Like, I think that there is really good stuff that you can do with that. I'm left disappointed, but many people loved the book just as well, and I think that many people are going to love this, if not more, because I do think that if I were to recommend between the two, I would recommend the film now. Thank you very much for watching. Hopefully you don't hate me by now. Probably do. Probably do. If you're interested in more, we have the website, realopinions.com. We have Twitter, Facebook, more reviews on this channel, as well as, you know, podcasts. Yeah, and links for all that below.